finally got a Peterborough expert coming on the channel. Excited to have Mitch here.
Prices absolutely catapulted coming out of the new year. We'd already had a strong year in 2020, and 2021 just absolutely blew everything away. You can see, look at these prices. This is from January, and this was already a massive price. People were wondering how this was going to survive. And it goes 531, 590, 627 average price in the span of a few months at the start of the year. This really helps paint the picture too about why Peterborough has exceeded some other towns in terms of their appreciation.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we've got Mitch Cleary from the Peterborough real estate market. So we finally got a Peterborough expert coming on the channel. Excited to have Mitch here. Hey, Mitch, how's it going?
Good, Matt. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I know you've got an entire presentation for us, and we'll jump into it in a second, but let's first just high level talk about the Peterborough market and maybe your familiarity or background with it. So, you know, what's the story with you and Peterborough, Mitch?
Yeah, so obviously, before, like with myself, before I dive into that, I'll tell you just quick, our Peterborough market's the same as most of these, you know, outskirts towns from on the outside of the GTA, where, as you'll see, it's been on a crazy runaway. Matt, you've chronicled it a bit on your channel there, and I'll be looking forward to filling you guys in on that. On the inside here, we've had a crazy run in terms of trying to figure out what the underpinning factors were with this market. And myself personally, being involved here, seeing what's going on right now is super relevant to me, because I'll never forget the subprime crisis in 2007, 2008, because of the way it affected our family business, which is a home building business. And that's really what got me my start in real estate, was my experience and sort of background with the family home building business. And seeing the goods and the bads with that, and realizing that even though when you're in home building, you're in the construction business, you are really in the real estate business. And as a builder, you're almost a part-time economist, because you're always trying to hedge your upsides, downsides of buying this land and projecting into the future. So grew up in a household where that was the table talk all my life, and segued over into real estate about 1.5 years ago. Had a great start. I'm from the community, so I had a lot of friends that immediately, you know, knew my understanding of the market, and were willing to trust me. And then just 6 months ago, myself and a seasoned vet here in town, Tamer Kamar, joined up and started a team. And so he's got 18 years experience, and you know, so we've got some pretty deep roots in the city, and yeah, we've been helping a lot of clients out through this and trying to navigate it. So we feel really confident in speaking about our market.
Awesome. And before we jump into it, for anyone that isn't a Peterborough local, what kind of city is Peterborough? Is it a commuter city, like as in like a bedroom community? Is it a student, you know, city because you've got like a college there? Is it a like tourist or vacation city? What would you classify it as? Or is there kind of one label we can apply?
Yeah, so it used to be, you probably would have, if you went back not too long ago, you would have probably called it like a manufacturing town. Like I have an uncle who's 60 years old, and he grew up, like GE was a hub here, major employer, and we had a lot of manufacturing, and that was our core roots. And just to breeze through that, like, I mean, we have the Autonomy River that cuts through here. So originally, Peterborough, it's dubbed the Electric City. That's because they were one of the first, you know, cities to make major use of hydroelectric damming, and they had electrical power. So right from its core roots, they took off with a lot of manufacturing because of that potential. And it was relatively cheap compared to Toronto, obviously, to be out here, but we had good power and access to the GTA. So we were a manufacturing place primarily for a number of years, and that's really switched. You know, a lot of big manufacturers have left us over the last decade and 20 years. just because it's too expensive to be here, and a lot of the future development to grow out their stuff is not here. The land isn't quite available. The commercial development land isn't quite available. So I would say right now people would definitely identify us as an education town for sure. We have Trent University, we have Sir Sanford Fleming College, and we actually have Seneca College, which is a flight school. So we do have a major influx of international and interprovincial students. That's obviously changed our rental market in the last year and a half with COVID, and a lot of the abroad studies, a lot of the conventional or the rental situations that used to make sense here have changed. But then also we are somewhat of a retirement town. We have just a ton of golf courses, and we have a regional hospital. So our hospital is very well equipped, and it pulls in from all kinds of other areas in terms of the stuff that it can take care of. So we're known for our healthcare, and just being a good little retirement town. We do have an older average age than the rest of Ontario. And also on the tail end of it, if you look at our employment side of things, you'll notice that we are definitely sort of recreational and kind of seasonal employment based. We have the Kawartha Lakes, we have the canal system, the lift lock. Not that the lift lock is so much of a massive driver, but it's part of the canal system, which brings people through our town. People are on the lakes. Several of the great lakes that are connected to the canal system are very close to us here. So a lot of people like to vacation very close to Peterborough. Clear Lake, Stony Lake, Buckhorn, Shamong, a lot of good rental vacations out there. And a lot of those are only like 15, 20 minutes from Peterborough. So a lot of our stuff can be, like seasonal tourism as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, appreciate the breakdown. And so I know you've got a presentation ready, so let's jump into it and just dive deeper into the everything Peterborough.
Awesome. Okay, so starting with this, before I dive into everything, I just want to tell you that it's very important to disclaimer Peterborough when you start talking in statistics, is there's really two separate things you're talking about, because there's Peterborough County, which we have statistics for, and there's the city of Peterborough. Most of my focus, and really probably your viewers, the investor market, is going to be most interested in the city of Peterborough, because that's really what we're talking about when we're looking at income properties. But then we do encompass a much larger geographical area. So our stats are typically broken down into city and county. I'll focus the most on the city. I'll gloss over the county because it obviously has an effect on the city, but geographically it's a massive area. So the trends are a lot harder to pin, and it encompasses a lot of waterfront. So it really makes the stats deviate. So for the most part, we're going to be focused on the city of Peterborough, not so much the region. Yeah,
appreciate that breakdown.
And then I just wanted to quickly, before I start diving right into just price, appreciation last year, months of inventory, all that stuff that's right down to the nitty gritty. To me, that's kind of almost like, we're dissecting what we're seeing in a really microscopic small time frame, but it's like we all, the stats are really just reflections of what's happening out there sort of economically and socially, right? And so if we're going to talk about them, the only real way to make total sense of them is to just do a quick gloss over of a couple of key points. So the work from home changes, I wanted to mention that specifically because where our market is at right now and where it's going, I think are largely going to be affected by this. They certainly have been, because so many of the clients that I've worked with over the last year and a half have been people that are migrating out of the GTA that have mobile work, HR jobs, any type of job possible you can name where they can work from home. A lot of people with good Toronto salaries have been moving to our city because it has a lot to offer in terms of amenities, and it was really affordable in terms of when you look at Ontario, the options you had. So the big question mark, what's going to happen with any of these contracts being renegotiated, and if people have to leave the city, because obviously with the vaccination rates, that's like top of mind right now in terms of how that's going to play out. Obviously, I'm not going to hammer in on this stuff because you guys cover it all the time. We're really interested to see what's going to happen with interest rates. Obviously, we got a pending election, and depending on how the immigration policy doesn't affect us as immediately as the GTA, but of course, everything that's happening here, we're just a ripple out effect of the GTA. So depending on if we do have an election triggered and what the budget policy and immigration policy is going to be, we're really keeping an eye on as well. I want to mention this quickly: the $1 million wall. Peterborough is still extremely strong right now versus a lot of other peripheral cities that wouldn't be, right outside the GTA, but are still sort of really close to us when I'm thinking of Bowmanville, Newcastle, because I notice a lot of those towns, we've done some sales out there, and it seems that there's a big pack of buyers that are good up to $1 million, and they just can't go a dollar beyond that because of the down payment requirement changes. So as soon as what they're looking for, what they find palatable for $1 million exceeds what they want to pay, and it's on to the next town, right? So it's and those people just keep. It seems like some of those cities have sort of plateaued. Like the Durham region certainly plateaued much before we did, because we're kind of closely intertwined with a lot of those agents out there, and it seemed like they really hit their slowdown where places weren't getting multiple offers and stuff a little quicker than we did, and it just, their average price point was so much higher that it seemed like people were just getting tapped and they had to push out one step further, go that extra half hour to Peterborough. So we're still affordable in that regard, so we still have some gas, so to speak, to use up there. Rents and secondary suites, this blew us up majorly last year, because there was a point where our rents went up so quick that there was great opportunities to buy these bungalows that could be suited in the basement, and you could exceed the returns you could get on a duplex. But those have basically they've reached a point of arbitrage now, and it's pretty much maxed out. But it's still worth mentioning, because the average home in Peterborough, there's a ton of little brick bungalows. That was the home here. That was the, between like the 50s right up to the, mid 80s. So many bungalows with like a side entrance, and those were getting bought up left, right, and center. And it was just a constant feeding frenzy over the last year between first-time home buyers trying to get that place with a little bit of income in the basement so they could stretch their budget, and full-on investors looking to get the exact same place. So that really changed what the average property sale price looked like. And then the last one is new construction. I'm going to glance over that, but you'll see later on in this slide that it's changing a little bit, but it was a huge bottleneck coming up to this point, and I think it's a big part of the reason why we're where we're at. So diving into it here, I just want to show that the sentiment right now over the last couple of months, the start of the year, we saw this epic boom where we were all sitting there in December over the holidays and said, we have zero inventory. Like there was points in time when I could go online and I would see 30 homes for sale. And we knew this is trouble. And it was between December and February, it was absolutely out of control in terms of the gains that happened. And we have all felt a bit of a slowdown over the summer here. A lot of people talking about that. It's just seasonal stuff that's going to happen in terms of people not paying attention to real estate as much as they did in April. And I just want to quickly show the trajectory really of, this is the showing activity from January to June 31st. So basically this is the 2021 weekly average. So you can see that we started above. You see up in March, that's really when that was more or less the peak of the frenzy here. And then it's been trending down ever since. We felt a real lull here in April. We had another wave of lockdowns, and simultaneously so many people were trying to take profits, it seemed, that owned multiple properties. And we really felt that on some of the listings we had, but still consistently now the showing activity is down. So we're sort of trending on a flat line with prices right now, and we're really curious to see if we're going to hit that conventional fall spike, because we've already had a really big year of sales. So we're wondering if we've taken any of the sales out of the system early,
Yeah, I appreciate you breaking this down for us.
So this is kind of the mother lode of data for the year. And basically, when you look at this, we're not looking at months of inventory anymore in this market. We're on to days, because that's the only way to really make sense out of it all, because we've been below a month this whole year. Last year, we had a massive year of price appreciation as well, but generally speaking, we're always hovering right above or right below that 1 month. And then this year, it's just been, as you can see, well below the month consistently. So in terms of what's happening here, prices absolutely catapulted coming out of the new year. We'd already had a strong year in 2020, and 2021 just absolutely blew everything away. You can see that we were below 1 month of inventory coming into the year, and then it just continued to get compressed right down to 15, basically half a month of inventory in March. And you can see, look at these prices. This is from January, and this was already a massive price. People were wondering how this was going to survive. And it goes 531, 590, 627 average price in the span of a few months at the start of the year. And that was when it was absolutely at a fever pitch. There was 20, 30 offers happening on a lot of properties. And just about everybody that owned multiple properties was considering selling one or two to capitalize on that. And then so when you look into April, we see this big drop because, simultaneously, look at the new listings here is fairly strong. And then the sales sort of just didn't quite keep up with the pace of the new listings. Our inventory creeps up a little bit, and the prices took obviously you have to adjust for this. Like this probably isn't reflective of how much it actually dropped. That probably emphasizes a little bit what actually happened, but we definitely all felt a softening in April, and places that we thought would have sold higher sold for less. And then steadily, it just, after that, there's that little pause, and then a lot of buyers who were fatigued just got right off the bench. I know it myself with people I had. We said, hey, guys, like, stuff is starting to, instead of 20 offers, we're down to 5. Like, you might, let's get going again. And then they did, and then here we go again. We're, average price is 608, 636. So June is the new high, all-time record again. So we've surpassed our high in March. In June, and we're back down to 18 days of inventory. So we're still in kind of the sleepy feeling summer market, but the way that everything is poised right now is, of course, like the immediate trajectory within the next couple months is we're set for big price gains, continuing large price gains, like in the magnitude of, you see May to June, $30,000 jump in the average. It's not going to be a massive surprise if that continues over the next few months with the way that the inventory is trending.
Yeah, I think that's something that we see across the board in so many markets right now, is just that lack of inventory, or months of inventory on hand is just so low that even if, a few people are getting nervous about where the market's headed, there's no inventory to allow any real change.
Exactly. And it seems that the market just can't recover quick enough from any little blip of inventory we get, like we did in April. It's so quickly people get off the bench and get back into the buying mode, and it seems to always respond in kind right now. So this is just a quick little to show you this is current number of active listings and numbers sold in the previous 30 days. And so there's only 2 categories here, other than way up at the million plus mark, where we have active listings, basically the months of inventory within a certain price bracket, kind of growing rather than being basically decimated. And you're getting it right around this right at the $500,000 range, and then another one right at the $400,000 range. But honestly, this one's a bit misleading, I think, because basically ever since the dawn of from January to March, when everything jumped, between 60 to 90,000, depending on what exact thing you were looking at. From then on in, the pricing of real estate's been $399, $499. There's no, it's kind of pick a price and then just whatever happens, because nobody knows. And so I think there's an abundance of listings going right around these $100,000 increments. But nonetheless, I think it also is reflective. The reason I showed it is because what people are getting for this amount of money is really compressing and diminishing. And I think more and more people are stretching for these price points with pretty marginal stuff that a year ago there just wasn't even a chance that their home was worth that. So everyone's trying to reach these like benchmark prices, you know, like, oh, I've heard the one down the road went for 4 or went for 5. Like, I want to get that for mine, even though it's probably not necessarily worth that. So we have kind of clusters around those price points. So average annual sale price for the city of Peterborough. You'll see, obviously, when we just track the graph, it's not much different than a lot of these Ontario cities where you see the abnormal jump in 17 to be surpassed only by this monster jump in 2021. So this is 27.2%. It's showing an average right now, like that's a moving average of $606,000. If you remember a couple slides ago, our price is actually up more, and I believe it's like in the 630,000s. In June was the average price. So there's a chance that we're establishing that's going to move ahead still. But we are just far beyond where we were last year, and last year was a crazy year by you know, every stretch. So of course this could come down before the year's over, because this is to date. This is from December this year, but really big growth this year. This one right here is overlaying. It's essentially it's month by month. It's all the stuff we went over before. This is a bar graph of price, and what's overlaid is some metrics about number of new listings, number of active listings, number of sales. So it's just a pretty good visual depiction of the sort of spread that starts to happen here, the gap that happens in April, where we have the listings are coming on quicker than the sales are happening, and then the price dips, and then here they're starting to converge again, and the price is going back up. So just a few different ways of articulating the same things we've mentioned. So so this is new housing construction activity. I'm going to go back to the other slide in a second, but what I want to show you is right here. So it starts April 2021, typically a massive month for housing starts in terms of frost being out of the ground, people being ready to dig. You know, look, 6 completions, 14 starts. So let's go back to this, because this really helps paint a picture too about why Peterborough has exceeded some other towns in terms of their appreciation. Is just really a supply bottleneck. So when we look at 2018, these are detached numbers, and sorry, this is cropped off a little bit. This is single detached. This is basically town / apartment dwellings, and this is like apartment buildings and other.
Gotcha.
So when we look at the detached dwellings, because that was where the emphasis of the buyer demand has been, you know, Peterborough was no different in the fact that people wanted more yard, more space, place for the dog, place for the kid, and people that were getting out of condos in Toronto that represented a large part of the real pressure on our market in terms of buyer demand. They weren't looking to come and move into a town or an apartment. So a lot of this inventory in 19 and 2020, it doesn't really help take the pressure off. So look at all the historical numbers, years we've built: 237, 186, 150, on and on. And then 2018, 39, 2019, 72, 2020 is 72. So
yeah, that seems really strange, to be honest.
It just, I mean, obviously, without saying too much about it, it boiled down to there just wasn't enough developments ready in time for this boom. Obviously, nobody predicted it to this extent, but it kind of got us handcuffed here.
Yeah, because that's crazy to think, because, you know, most real estate markets have been very hot for the last 3 or 4 years, right? Since 2017. So to see that drop off that significantly, really appreciate you highlighting this for us.
Yeah, and I've been following, there's a lot of great Twitter accounts and stuff out there I'm sure you're aware of about basically just the reason why this can be allowed to happen. And it's a very nuanced and you know, deep, but there is so many things to do with our government at all layers and levels that it isn't really that pro housing, generally speaking. And also not only just that, because there's a huge kind of NIMBYism contingent that's blocked so many potential things in our town and many others. So a lot of times it's the residents themselves too. People don't realize that, you know, if they block a development down the street from them, so every other neighborhood's trying to do the same thing. And then when your kids go to buy a home, there's a reason why it's when there's nothing available. So lots of reasons, but lots of activism going on to try and reverse this one, I see all across Ontario. But nonetheless, we kind of got stuck there. So I'm just going to show you now, because this is kind of anybody who's interested in getting speculative with housing prices, not just from a cash flow perspective. This is definitely of interest. Is that, so here's currently like the register, these are like the permit ready building lots out there, low density, so detached, 406. So draft approved, yeah, we've got, you know, a healthy amount, and these are all according to the provincial imposed criteria. But when you go ahead and look, so Parkland's on Shamong, we have two subdivisions essentially, and they're both in the north end of Peterborough, whereas conventionally there would be a few subdivisions spattered throughout, you know, one in the south, one in the west, you know, the different areas of town, right? We have two that are both in the north. One's got 130 singles available, and the other one's got 274 singles available. So that essentially adds up to the numbers we talked about before. Now, you know, that's just not a lot of inventory to take pressure off of what's happening right now, right? In terms of the yearly amount of sales that we're seeing, and even, you know, if I were to back up just, you know, monthly in the city of Peterborough, we're seeing, you know, we're consistently over 100 sales, even with our extremely limited inventory. So it's the type of thing where if our inventory gets back down below half a month and people are really scrambling, of course they're jumping over into this stuff, but the closing dates are far out now, that people are having bottlenecks with all types of the construction materials. This whole supply chain is so difficult right now with bringing these things to market. So a lot of these, yes, they can represent purchases, but a lot of them aren't going to be move-in ready homes for somebody who's sold firm in Toronto and needs a place to go. So we're realistically within the next year, we're still very tight on surplus, you know, kind of that pressure relief valve that is new homes. So Peterborough County. So just, I'll do a bit of a wrap on the city of Peterborough there, and maybe we can kind of pin some of those questions, because I'll just do a bit of a gloss over of the county too, just to, obviously people might have a bit of interest in it, and it does fall into our turf. A lot of the people that might be interested in Airbnbs and in cottage properties generally. But it'd be such a separate conversation. Some of your audience from the first half of the city of Peterborough might not be as interested in that. So generally speaking, right now, it's pretty obvious where we're at with the city of Peterborough. And in terms of it right now, we do definitely see prices rising rather sharply in the short term. At the moment, they on, like, graphically, they're basically sidelining because we had that dip in April. But we are into the summer months where the showing activity just is dropping. And if we do see the, you know, classic fall market and buyers return once the good weather is kind of on the wrap and kids are back in school, if we do see the buyers come back out in that regard, it's not going to be pretty in terms of the lack of inventory that's there, because we're not rebuilding the inventory right now in the slow months. Obviously, we're going to expect to see a wave of inventory. And in terms of the prices, short term, like, they're just on the launch pad. They've kind of been going sideways for a little bit here, but if we do see continued buyer demand in the fall, obviously prices are poised to launch. But that being said, all the factors we mentioned before, we know that the supply is low, like everything on the supply side is low, including the new construction. But if we do see any reversal of that trend, where so much of the upside of our market, so much of the gain that we've seen has been pressure from GTA buyers moving out this way, and their owner occupants was a lot of what we saw. There was a lot of investors, but there was a ton of owner occupants that are working from home. And there may be some point when they have to move back, and that's going to be of major interest, because it's the only real factor that's going to differentiate, that's going to be different than the other macro factors you're going to analyze for Ontario in general. You know, of course, everybody's worried about interest rates, the election, on and on, immigration policy, but something that's uniquely got our market vulnerable is what is going to happen with those GTA residents and whether they're going to have to return home. I've been reading a lot of things that so far major employers, I read a good article this morning. It was from The Economist. So, you know, the source is good. They interviewed tons of HR headquarters with some major employers like Apple and whatnot. And it sounds like it's a pretty good mix about who's going to be calling people back full time, who's going to go with 3 days a week, who's saying no. We're like, there's some major banks saying we're all in on work from home and we're like closing headquarters. So it seems like a pretty decent split. But even if it's 50-50, I don't see how too many people are going to manage to continue to tackle the commute from Peterborough into the GTA if they get called back. So I personally am expecting a little bit of a fallout from that category of demand in the next year with the reopenings. So we're really interested to see how that plays out. And our rents have absolutely boomed as well. And that's without our really large student contingent here.
Right.
So when they do return, if they do, I think things are looking pretty favorably on rents, and rents are already, you know, fairly good here, but most places are being priced out of cash flow situations, but I would say rents are probably poised to continue to go up. So I will jump into the county now, because this covers a really large geographical area. And because it covers so many of these lakes, for example, you know, Stony Lake being in here, without looking at it on the map exactly, I think Stony's up here. Some of those lakes are super, super high end, and they really skew. Like if you go by a house out in Havelock, which is in the county of Peterborough, and you buy a house on Stony Lake, they're so different that when you look at the statistics and average price in the price per month and the graphs, they don't paint a very good picture, because when you think of the average home in Peterborough, you can perfectly visualize what the average home is. It's that little brick bungalow from like the 50s to the 80s. That's the average home, and that costs about $600,000, give or take. And that rings true with what the stats will tell you. But when you talk about the county, there's no average. There's, you know, all kinds of small residential dwellings in little neighborhoods, and places on a well for you know, $600,000, and then there's $3 million cottages on Stony. So it's very tough to draw useful stuff out of this without getting really into the weeds on breaking down the individual price categories. But generally speaking, of course, like the trend lines ring true, because no matter what way you slice it and dice it, if there's less sales happening at 3 million on Stony, it just does mean there's less appetite. So if that reflects an average price, you know, it's somewhat reflective of what's going on. But one thing that's of interest, when you look at the county of Peterborough, when I got into this business a couple of years ago, it was very often that in the city of Peterborough, you'd see a months of inventory around, like, you know, hovering just above or below 1. And then the county would consistently be much higher, you know, within the 2s, sometimes a little bit higher than that, and closer to what you would almost consider balanced. And now we're looking at a territory that large, and you're still talking in March, we were down to 15 days of inventory. So I think that's significant just when you look at what a crunch our inventory was in and all of the waterfront. And it helps explain, like, you made a great prediction on it, Matt, on your channel. And that was where I really, like, that planted the seed for me with the idea where as soon as COVID hit, that their home was going to become their castle. And so many people that were on the brink of retiring and leaving the GTA forever, not so much just recreational cottage buyers, like people that had a great successful career. They were baby boomers, you know, late 50s, say, and they lived in the GTA in a condo or in a decent sized detached dwelling, but they wanted to get out of the city. That was, you know, I knew I'm going to leave the city someday and go to the lake. I'm doing it now. You know, I'm doing it this year when I can't do anything else. So I think that it pulled so much demand ahead on waterfront property, and that really between that and people, just the crash on the rental market there, the Airbnb prices have gone through the roof. So a lot of people did buy them for recreational purposes as well. And a lot of people from Toronto just buying them to have a cottage and go. But there was a lot of people that I think it tipped over the edge to finally like sell the business in Toronto, shut it down, come out here. And so a lot of them are I don't think that the waterfront is going to be subject to the same risk of people having to revert back to the city, because the ones who came out and bought cottages aren't necessarily the same ones, like, you know, the young couple that came and moved to Peterborough and they're working from a laptop. But nonetheless, it's not surprising if the demand is going to slow down on the waterfront right now, because the prices have just gotten so high. And I've had some groups back out just because they said, we just can't find what we want in our price range. And that's healthy budgets up to $1 million. They're still not happy with what they're finding. So you see, it's nothing much different than what was going on with the trend line in Peterborough here, where the inventory has been really low. March was the absolute crux of it. And then it sort of wavered back closer to that 1 month. And prices have been relatively stable in this period. So right now the waterfront's kind of in a holding pattern, and it is a bit of a question mark. Of course, it's not subject to, you can't create more of it, and it's going to draw a big drag on this. But another thing that's worth mentioning is I'm not aware of a ton of new developments, because our county does include a lot of peripheral towns like Norwood, Havelock, etc. They also don't have a really healthy amount of new homes going in. When you stop talking about the waterfront, you start talking about just subdivisions in these smaller towns. As far as I'm aware, there's not a real healthy amount of new construction going on there either. So the supply is going to be limited if the demand does keep up. So average annual sale price, same thing, where of course a couple massive, like, look at the steps up in these years. It's really been for years. The getting was good for so long with buying a recreational property, and then now it's just not. So average price up around 800,000 there. Again, not reflective of what that's going to get you on the water. So I think with these trend lines here, I won't dwell too much into this because I think we've covered the most of it, and I don't want to bore anybody. It's just more ways of saying the same thing. Demand is relatively sideways right now, and the inventory isn't changing. We're not seeing enough inventory to change it. Our prices are kind of flatlining. If we see a spike in demand in the county in the fall, of course, prices are going back up. So yeah, that's it. I don't know. I just want to say thanks, of course, Matt, for obviously having me on here, and for everybody for sitting through such a long debrief to get you guys going on Peterborough.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the breakdown, Mitch. It was very thorough. Definitely highlights what's going on for an outsider coming in. And I know in future videos, we'll probably explore example deals, maybe even talk about some of your own real estate transactions. But I think as an initial introduction to Peterborough, I think this is a great one. And I'm really glad you hit upon, the potential shift in demographics, right? With people looking to maybe, speed up the timeline of their retirement or pivot the type of retirement they're going to have. It does seem natural that individuals that either can telecommute all the time or most of the time, a market like Peterborough can be very attractive, while also still offering you some of the things that maybe people think of when they think of the Muskokas, right? You also have it right here with the Kawarthas. So yeah, really appreciate that breakdown and just the thoroughness, Mitch. So if you guys want to get in contact with Mitch, we're going to have links in the video description down below. And in fact, Mitch, you've actually got your own YouTube channel as well. So we'll make sure we link over to that. So awesome. You want to just let people know what they can expect on your channel?
Yeah, so I had another channel that was covering some of the more general real estate stuff you'd see, but I realized so many channels were covering the same thing. There's so many buyers. You can see 1,000 videos on things to look for when you buy your first home out there. So I split this off, and recently this year I just created a new channel that's purely Peterborough specific content. So if you subscribe, if you jump over to that channel and subscribe to that one, basically my aim with that, the content is everything Peterborough. So aside from doing market statistics focused stuff, now that I'm going to be doing this update on this channel, Matt, I think it's going to be, I'd like to do some more in-depth interviews there's some great commercial realtors in town that are a wealth of knowledge about, you know, some pending, you know, maybe annexation going on in the city in certain areas, and just focusing on little sub neighborhoods. And basically it's going to be Peterborough real estate and anything like Peterborough history and trend related. That's what that channel is all about. So nothing other than Peterborough. I'm not going to bore you guys with, you know, how to save up for a down payment on that one. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. So if you guys want to learn more about Peterborough, make sure you jump over, subscribe to the channel. We'll link in the video description down below. If you guys are looking at investing or buying a home in Peterborough, really encourage you to reach out to Mitch or his team. Again, links in the video description down below, and really appreciate you breaking down everything Peterborough for us, Mitch.
Awesome. Pleasure to be here, Matt. Thank you, Peter. And Matt, all your staff has been so helpful, and glad to be here and looking forward to returning next month. So